I'm about to get married to the love of my life. That is, until I found out that he's actually in love with my stepsister. There was a lot of clues that led up to it, but I'm going to walk you guys through the devastating wedding when I was about to get married and what happened on my wedding day. I'm starting to have some real doubts about my current fiancé, and I'm not sure if it's all in my head or not. Even worse, I'm afraid that my doubts may have caused serious damage to my relationship, and I don't know if it's even possible to, hit rewind. To provide a bit of background, I'm 25 and I met Billy about 5 years ago. He was a TA in one of my college classes, and he was always really attentive when it came to how I could improve my work on some of the smaller weekly assignments that he graded. We started occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss the course, which is when we started to learn a little bit more about each other personally. We especially bonded on the issue of family, mainly because we both live with our fathers but don't really have great relationships with them. My own father always kind of hated me, and he never made much of a secret about because I remind him of my mom. She had cheated on him when I was still young, really too young to really know what was going on, and she eloped with the other man soon after my dad found out about it. He's never stopped supporting me financially, even when he expressed doubts about my ability to study business and entrepreneurship. But emotionally, it would be an understatement to say that there's been some distance between us. As for Billy, I don't actually know too much about the details. He gets really reserved when talking about it, but I've been able to gather that his mother ran out on them as well, and never really looked back. So we have really similar views on issues like loyalty, fidelity, which makes it a lot easier to picture a long-term future once we started dating. Now that I've got my startup running and Billy's almost ready to start working on his, we decided it's finally time to take the next step. Get married and move out of our parents' place, but now that we're getting closer to the wedding, we've hit kind of a snag over the past few months that makes me wonder if those views on loyalty were as mutual as I thought. Around the time I was in junior high, my father got married to Rosa. She had a daughter about 5 years younger than me, Sarah, who's now 20. She'd had Sarah in a previous marriage, but Sarah unfortunately lost her father in an accident with a drunk driver. She's been in the car at the time, so my dad always treated her with a lot of sympathy and tried to care for her without replacing her dad. But they still grew close over time, and I think my father was happy to have a daughter in his life who did not remind him of my mom. This meant that while I was, never technically lacking in support, Sarah sometimes got a few perks I never got. The most recent was my father helping her pay for a semester-long study abroad program in London. That brings us to what's been going on over the past couple of months. Sarah got back a little before the holidays, so Christmas dinner was the first time Billy had seen her in about half a year. Naturally, she was still really excited to talk about some of her experiences. She's always been the type who really loves to learn the history of any new place that she goes to. So, she came back with a lot of interesting stories, so I didn't think much about it when Billy mentioned after dinner that Sarah's been maturing quite a bit since the first meet. Because it's honestly a true statement. She's becoming very smart of a woman since her time abroad, and I was happy to see it. What started making me feel a little suspicious was days later when we were out together and I noticed him scrolling through Sarah's social pages. He doesn't tend to show much interest in social media in general. Like, if I reference a story from my day that I've posted about earlier, I'll usually have to retell the entire story because it's not likely he'll have seen the post. So, I casually mentioned that it's weird to see him online like that. He got a little annoyed that I was looking at his phone, and I really just sort of noticed over his shoulder. But he explained that he's been thinking about the story Sarah was telling us about London and was curious to see pictures of some of the places that she'd mentioned. Fair enough. About a week after that, I was over at my place when I noticed a copy of somebody's daughter on the nightstand. Billy's not exactly an Oprah book club type of person, so I kinda laughed because it seemed a little weird. But he said that, he'd seen it mentioned on Sarah's page and thought it looked interesting, and I have not read it, but I understand the author had some family difficulties growing up, so I could see where he might be a bit interested. Again, fair enough, and for a while it was just little things like that. It felt like Sarah was coming up in conversation more often, even when she was not technically being mentioned directly. If we were looking for a movie to watch together, he would suggest one that Sarah just happened to mention on her social recently. If Sarah posted a picture of a dish that she's eaten at some restaurant, it seemed like it would not be a week before he took me to the same place. There was nothing actively suspicious about it. He was still spending all his time with me. It just felt weird. And because of his explanations were generally harmless, I felt like I could not really say anything about it without coming off like I was just being crazy or paranoid. Even the thought of that made me feel guilty, and like I was going out of my way to stir up trust issues with the man who loved me enough to marry me. When I started to get really paranoid was when he started becoming less available. He'd talk about getting an in-house job at an advertising firm to save up a bit of money before he would start his own startup. I was fully supportive of the idea, since he's been in the planning stages of his own company, and it's been a while, so it seemed like a bit more experience might help him out. He told me he was being courted by a few potential prospects, which included a lot of dinners and talks with employers. One of the nights he had to cancel plans for one of those dinners, I was sitting at home watching videos on my computer. And occasionally I scroll through friends' feed when that, boring feeling hits. I saw that Sarah had posted a great night out, going to dinner and a concert with a lovely man. So I texted her to ask who the lucky guy was, and she responded 20 minutes later asking what guy I'm talking about. When I pulled up her feed again, the post had been edited to say that she was just with a friend. I figured maybe she was just shy about it, so I pretty much let it go, until I saw her at breakfast the next morning, but she told me that she had not been seeing anyone, and again she'd said that she'd just been going out the past night with a friend. I mentioned the post edit, but she just pulled up the Facebook app on her phone and showed me there's no edit history. I could have sworn I've seen it, but I could not deny when she showed me that there was nothing there. I later pulled it up again on my computer, but by that point she had deleted the post entirely. I felt like I was going absolutely crazy, and on top of that I'd embarrassed her enough to make her delete the post, so I just dropped it and decided not to mention it again. If I had seen it, she obviously did not want to talk about it. And if I was making things up, well, honestly, I did not know what to think about that. Anyways, but nothing weird really happened for a week or two after it. So I ultimately let it go and moved on. Things came to a head a couple weeks ago. I was out at lunch, interviewing a potential social media manager for my business. On the way home, I saw Sarah and Billy sitting outside a little Thai fusion spot. It's a place I've been wanting to check out with Billy for a while, so I was going to find a parking spot and meet up with them. But when I looked again, I saw that they were holding hands. It threw me into an even bigger state of confusion because now I really wasn't sure how much of an earlier suspicion I had was real. I decided to just go home. When I heard laughing downstairs a couple hours later, I saw that Sarah had come home. She and Billy were in the kitchen with Rosa and my dad, and I tried as casually as I could to ask where they've been. They lied. They said they've been out shopping, and when I tried to catch them in the lie by asking for details, they said they could not tell me because they were looking for a surprise for their wedding. Well, I'm not proud of it, but I might have lost a bit of patience a bit prematurely, and I was tired of doubting everything I've seen for weeks, so I just asked directly if Billy was cheating on me. He acted surprised and said this was coming out of nowhere, so I brought up everything that had struck me as weird, and Sarah got back from abroad. The sudden obsession with her social media. She said I was being unfair, that accusing Billy was one thing, but accusing her was too far, that she's never been anything but a friend and a sister to me, and the edited post, the restaurant, I did not go to the part about them holding hands across the table, because that's when Sarah slapped me. It was disgusting to think she's betrayed me like that. My dad was furious. He said if I ever again accused his daughter of stooping so low as to get involved with my fiancé, I would not be welcome in their home again. And that's honestly when the whole thing kind of ended. Things have been really tense around the house with Billy. We've still been moving forward with the wedding plans, and we haven't really mentioned the fight since it happened. But the tension in the air is thick. And I know I'm not the only one who's thinking about it. I just don't really know what to do about it. I mean, Sarah was right. She's been a sister to me and we get along so well, and I've never blamed her for my dad's preferential treatment because she didn't really have a choice in it. I guess I'm just wondering how to move on from this. It feels like I've ruined my marriage before it even started, like I've ruined my relationship with my family on top of it. I've been throwing myself into work when not just planning the wedding, because I need to escape, but it hasn't been working. So now I'm looking for the third-party opinions. Is there any way that I can just make amends for the harm I've caused with my paranoia? I want to believe the damage can be undone, but I'm so in the middle of this that I just can't see how. Update number 1. Hey guys, before I update everyone on my current marriage situation, I want to thank everyone who showed me their support. And I even wanted to thank the people who accused me of lying or twisting facts to believe what I, quote, wanted to believe. I don't agree with the choice of words because it's crazy to think anyone, quote, wants to believe they're being cheated on, but it did help me to realize I needed another source of objective feedback, and that maybe I should look to someone who knows the people involved. Given my family history, I figured I wasn't going to get that from them. So instead, I decided to have lunch yesterday with Billy's brother, Chris. He moved out of their father's house just after college, so he and Billy aren't so close that he'd be overly biased, but I thought he might still be able to tell me if he knew anything that would justify me having doubts. And he actually told me some things that I don't know that helped to put things into perspective. I'd mentioned before that Billy's never gone into a lot of detail about his mother leaving. So, as it does turn out, that might be because he simply doesn't know why they left. But from what Chris told me, the answer might be pretty dark. Apparently, Billy's father was not exactly a peach of a dad when they were growing up. I've talked about my own father hating me, but Billy's father, he sounds like he really took the cake. If Billy got in trouble at school, or if any of his grades started to slip below a B, and that was just when he was sober enough not to get physical. He was a lot more lenient with Chris for some reason, so Chris never experienced enough of it firsthand to go too far into detail. He said that none of the physical stuff ever happened in front of him, and for a while he just assumed my bruises that he saw were from Billy getting into a fight at school. But no matter what, he could tell that their dad terrified Billy. When they got old enough for Chris to understand a little better what was happening, he starts to wonder if maybe their mom had left because their father has been punishing her as well. Billy always hated her for leaving them behind, but Chris was only about 4 when she left and never saw enough to know how things were. Anyways, Chris speculated that Billy's fear of their dad might be why he's like being around Sarah, because he never grew up with an affectionate father and the only time he gets to see that side of my dad is when Sarah's around. That all makes a lot of sense to me, although I frankly have mixed feelings about the whole situation. It does explain a lot, but certain things like hanging out with me or holding hands at lunch still doesn't seem fully appropriate, right? At the same time, I'm thinking of talking to Billy and Sarah about it and apologizing, or is this the wrong move? I don't want to risk starting another fight by bringing everything up again. If there's a chance they're both ready to drop it all and move on, should I just keep my mouth shut and let it die? Update number 2. This is going to be a really hard update. I should have just kept my mouth shut with my fiancé and stepsister, but I decided to apologize anyways. The worst part is that I was apologizing more for my own sense of closure than theirs. Learning about Billy's history with his father and how the affecting his friendship with Sarah, it just made me feel so terrible. And I just wanted to know that they could forgive me for accusing them of cheating. So I invited Billy over last night when my father and Sarah's mom were going to be out at a friend's anniversary party. I was going to make 3 of us dinner so we could have a private talk without my dad interfering, since he'd sort of escalated things the first time. The problem is I got back kind of late. I'd had a lot of errands to run earlier in the day, and some of which have been done during work hours. With the wedding in just a few days, I wanted to get all that done so I wasn't scrambling to do it all of the honeymoon. I don't really plan things well, so I was still in line at the grocery store buying things for dinner when Billy called to tell me that he was pulling up. No problem there. Since Sarah was already home to let him in, I told him to hang out and I'd be back to cook in about half an hour. Thanks to hitting a lucky break with traffic, I made it home about 10 minutes earlier than I would have expected that time of day. But when I got inside, there was no sign of Billy or Sarah other than their cars parked out front. I called out their names and I heard what sounded like a quick shriek followed by a thump upstairs. I won't even try to play a coy with what happened next. I did not act innocent and I did not feign ignorance. I dropped the groceries on the counter, went straight upstairs, and I did not even consider knocking before opening Sarah's door. I found out about what I was expecting at that point. Billy was buttoning up his shirt and trying to slip his feet into his shoes. Sarah was fully dressed, but her makeup was smeared, and her hair was far from as perfect as usual. I looked at them for all of 2 seconds and marched straight back downstairs, but Billy tried to follow me and kept telling me nothing's happened. I laughed. Then he tried to tell me they've only been kissing. As if that's going to make me feel any better, guys. I did not even feel like having a drawn-out argument at the time. So, I told him point blank that the wedding is off. That's when Billy just kind of changed. He was just silent at first, then he sort of looked back towards the stairs. Sarah still had not come down. I assume because she did not know what to say, but as soon as Billy saw that we were alone, he laughed at me and told me that the wedding would still be happening. I was dumbstruck, but he would even have the audacity to say that. But then he reminded me about how my dad had almost kicked me out of the house the last time I accused him of being with Sarah. As it turned out, I've been right the first time. But it was my dad's reaction that spurred things to keep going. He told me that Sarah loved him, and that he'd be stupid not to choose her when she's the one who's going to get more love and money from my father than I ever will. That he's going to go wind up with her no matter what, and that I can't do anything to stop it because no one will believe me if I accuse her again before the wedding. The whole exchange felt surreal. I loved this man for years, and I've never seen a glimmer of the side of him that he was showing me now, and the scariest part was knowing that he had a point. I don't really think my dad was lying about kicking me out if I accuse Sarah again, not unless she comes clean herself, and I haven't talked to her yet to gauge whether that's something that she would do. I didn't even want to believe that she would do this, so it felt like all bets are off the table. And I know that the best thing for me personally would be to go ahead and leave this point, but I feel like that's kind of idealistic advice because people will just give you that aren't considering the reality of the situation. If my business were established and successful, maybe that option would be realistic. But I'm still just getting started. If I get kicked out right now, I don't have anywhere to go. I'm supposed to marry this man in just 2 days, and it feels like he's taken my entire life hostage. I don't know if there's even time to figure out a solution that won't just make things worse. Update number 3. This is going to sound absolutely insane after my last update, that I forgot that their wedding might have been the best wedding I could have ever hoped for. One of them was that I had invited Billy's dad to the wedding. It was something that we had disagreed on before I learned from Chris about their history, and I had sort of invited him behind Billy's back. At the time, I was just applying the same logic as inviting my own father. I knew Billy and his dad did not get along, but I also figured it was kind of hypocritical to ban family from your wedding while you're living in the house. Well, when I remembered that, I contacted Billy's dad and told him everything. The cheating, about the threats to get me kicked out of my father's house, and everything. And just to make sure I wasn't unleashing an abuser on the man, I also told him everything that Chris had told me so I could get his side of it. Billy's dad said that he wasn't surprised to hear that his son would do something like that to me. Apparently, Billy was always a bit of a spoiled brat by his family's money, and used it as an excuse for acting like he was above consequences. He told me that Chris was likely too young to remember things, but that annoying physical he heard was likely from Billy's constantly breaking things whenever they argued. and that the rest of Billy's punishments were basically just chores to teach him humility. I'd mixed feelings about the whole thing, partly because I still think of Chris as likely being the most objective out of all three of them, but their father sounded genuine enough when he was telling me his side, and he also said that he would not do anything to interfere unless I explicitly asked him to. He also promised that he'd help me find a place to stay if my dad followed through on kicking me out. I told him I'd think about everything and just let him know what I've decided on the wedding day. Well, the wedding day came, and it turned out that Billy really wasn't lying about leaving me for Sarah, because as I was getting ready, Sarah showed up in a bridal gown of her own. I apparently would have been more shocked if I never caught them cheating, since it turns out that they were already planning this. So, if anything, I guess I should be thankful that I found out when I did. But that did not keep me from making a loud enough commotion that it attracted my dad, Rosa, and Billy's father to the bridal suite, and none of them could believe what they saw. Billy's dad flew off the handle immediately. He tracked Billy down and starts to scream at him. He revealed that I've already told him about cheating and that he had been not surprised, but that even he did not think Billy could pull something off this absurd. My own father, on the other hand, was almost dead silent. He was just holding his crying wife, looking from me from Sarah in shock. Since I didn't really know how to address him, I instead decided to calm down Billy's. I reminded him that he'd promised not to do anything without my blessing. He seemed confused that I was telling him to lay off the son who's been cheating on me, but I told him it would be okay. And that must have put Billy at ease because he got his confidence back in record time, announcing to the guests that there'd been a slight change in plans. At that point, I just let Billy and Sarah begin the proceeding while I sat in the rows with Billy's father. I didn't even change out of my gown first, since I figured this was one good excuse that I'd have to wear white to someone else's wedding. That's what I did for the first part of the ceremony, anyways. Once it was time to exchange vows, I leaned over to Billy's dad and told him to let the jerk have it. He didn't waste a second. He marched right up to the aisle, grabbed his son by the ear, and dragged him out of the room like a kid. I made sure to record the whole thing on my phone and posted it on every social account I have. A few other guests did the same thing, so pretty much everyone Billy and I knew has seen the spectacle by now. It was beautiful, like I said, a best wedding I could have hoped for. It wasn't all revenge and claps on the back, though. The social media posting did get some backlash on both sides of the family, especially from people who had heard by the point about Billy's relationship with his father. For every handful of people who have praised me for getting revenge, there have been just as many blowing me up and calling me a monster for using Billy's childhood against him. Well, truth be told, I'll never know which side of the story is true. So, for all I know, they might have a point. As for my own father, he did apologize to me after the wedding. Not just because he didn't believe me earlier, but for the way he's treated me, my whole life. He admitted that it was wrong and stupid to blame me for my mother's own choice to betray him and elope with someone else. And he said nothing I ever could do would remind him as much as that betrayal as what Sarah did with Billy. I did not accept his apology. I didn't reject it, though. I'm just not ready. Needless to say, I'm a lot going on. There's so much happening, and I'm still kind of processing it. I asked him to give me some space for a couple days while I figure it out, and I might still take up Billy's dad on the offer to help me find my own place. I want to believe my dad is sincere, but I just don't know how long you're supposed to let your own family mistreat you before a sincere apology is just not made. Final update. Well, nothing too major has happened since my wedding, but I wanted to make one more update for anyone wondering where things are at. As you probably guessed, Billy's father kicked him out. He apparently wanted to do it for a while, and he'd hoped for getting married would finally be the push Billy needed to start his business and stand on his own 2 feet. Since that did not happen, his father decided to simply stop giving him more time. Not only did Billy lose his place, but his father made him leave behind everything that he's bought with his dad's money. His car, his clothes, his computer, everything. I only know this through Chris and Billy's dad, since Billy's now blocked on every account I have. Not that he ever looked at it much to begin with. Sarah has also been kicked out, although I told my dad not to do it. If he's only doing it so I'll stay, I don't know if I'll ever forgive him for how he treated me growing up, or if I'll ever forgive her for what she did, but I honestly do feel bad for her. Looking back on everything that was said and done, as well as some of the comments I received on my post, it kinda seems like she was at least partly a victim in all this. Someone pointed out that she's the same age I was when he met me, which is kinda gross to think about, combined with the fact that Billy told me himself he was interested in my dad's money. I don't think Billy ever actually cared about her. She may have broken my trust, but it's hard for me to think any woman deserves to be treated that way. I'm going to be taking up the offer Billy's dad made about helping me find my own place. I'm doing it with reservation. I still don't know how much I trust him. Chris told me about the way he treated Billy growing up, and honestly, trusting anyone right now is a bit hard for me, but he's offered to help me with a deposit on the apartment. Well, I do just want to say thank you guys, to everyone who's offered kind words and support. Thank you to at least a few people from both my family and Billy's who have reached out after the wedding. And I'm not technically alone, so I can't say thank you enough. And we're drafting a loan agreement this weekend to schedule a repayment plan to intend to focus on growing my business. And I'm hoping I'll be out of debt within a few months. So it looks like OP is just saying, you know what, I'm done with everyone. I'm going to cut off my father, I'm going to cut off Sarah, and I'm definitely going to cut off my cheating would-to-be soon ex-husband. Guys, I just want to know your thoughts on this story because it was a wild ride. Personally, if I was just to put myself in OP's situation, I wouldn't even know how to start to deal with this. I mean, the emotions and just the straight-up toxicness involved in this household was insane. Guys, drop it down below what you would have done in this situation, and let's discuss it in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every single day, and if you guys want to be a part of these daily stories, consider subscribing. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.